Hello and welcome to Sonnet Cast, William Shakespeare sonnets recited, revealed and relived. I am Sebastian Michael and this is Sonnet 19. Devouring time, blunt thou the lion's paws, and make the earth devour her own sweet brood. Pluck the keen teeth from the fierce tiger's jaws, and burn the long-lived phoenix in her blood. Make glad and sorry seasons as thou fleet'st, and do whate'er thou wilt, swift-footed time, to the wide world and all her fading sweets. But I forbid thee one most heinous crime. O carve not with thy hours my love's fair brow, nor draw no lines there with thine antique pen. Him in thy course untainted do allow, for beauty's pattern to succeeding men. Yet do thy worst, old time, despite thy wrong, my love shall in my verse ever live young. The heartfelt, somewhat self-conscious, but defiant and confident Sonnet 19 underlines the bold assertion I, the poet William Shakespeare, made in Sonnet 18, that it is my poetry itself that gives life to the young man who receives these sonnets and thus preserves his youth forever. And what does it actually mean? Devouring time, blunt thou the lion's paws, and make the earth devour her own sweet brood. You, time, who you eat up and destroy everything as you pass, blunt you the lion's paws and cause the earth itself to consume everything that is born of it, which is every plant and every living thing really, because all things that are born will ultimately return back to the earth. Pluck the keen teeth from the fierce tiger's jaws, and burn the long-lived phoenix in her blood. Make the fierce tiger's teeth, that are keen and eager to tear into the prey's flesh, fall out from its jaws as it reaches old age, and even burn up the phoenix, the mythical bird that is said to live for hundreds of years before bursting into flames at the end of its life, only to rise again from the ashes. Make glad and sorry seasons as thou fleet'st, make happy and sad seasons as you pass by fleetingly, for seasons here of course read periods of time generally, not just the literal seasons of the earth moving around the sun. And do whate'er thou wilt, swift-footed time, and do whatever you want, fast-moving time, to the wide world and all her fading sweets, to the wide world and all the beautiful things in it that all fade as you pass. But I forbid thee one most heinous crime. But I forbid you one most heinous crime. You can see how close the contemporary English really sits to the Shakespearean English. It's not a difficult sonnet to translate either, much as Sonnet 18 isn't. Here now comes this plea, or rather this edict, that I, the poet, give to time itself. O carve not with thy hours my love's fair brow. Do not carve lines into my love's beautiful face with your hours. We've had the 40 winters of Sonnet 2 besiege thy brow, and the hours of Sonnet 5 play the tyrant to the lovely gaze where every eye doth dwell. And here now time is told not to use his, time is personified here, his hours, to carve the young man's fair brow, to mean making his face go wrinkly with old age. Nor draw no lines there with thine antique pen, nor use your old pen to draw lines there. The pen, of course, is a metaphorical pen. Him in thy course untainted do allow. Allow him, my love, to be unaffected by you as you pass on your never-resting course, as I, the poet, called it in Sonnet 5, or rather actually called you never-resting time. And here is the reason for my edict and for my plea, but it's really, I'm telling you, time, what to do here. I'm not just asking you. I'm saying to you, allow him to be untainted by your course, and here is why. For beauty's pattern to succeeding men, to be used, or for him to exist as a template, or indeed model, for future generations, the idea being that the young man's beauty should be left intact by time, so that future generations will know what real beauty looks like, and can perhaps model themselves on it. And then the concluding couplet, which sounds almost like a throwaway gesture, but it's very profound. Yet do thy worst, old time, despite thy wrong, my love shall in my verse ever live young. Having said all that, do your worst, old time, because despite of the wrong that you do and have to do, it is after all in your nature as time to make everything turn old, disintegrate and ultimately die. My love will live forever and remain forever young in this, my poem. We are now firmly in new territory. Sonnet 18, with a flourish, stepped away from the preoccupation and task of the first 17 sonnets, and instead of urging the young man to create a son so as to be able to perpetuate his youthful beauty, told him directly that this, the sonnet itself, will keep him alive so long as men can breathe or eyes can see. Here now I, the poet, change tone and mode, but the message is the same. It is this, my sonnet, that will keep my love young and alive. And note how, as we even said in Sonnet 18, there is a connection between Sonnet 17 and Sonnet 18, and between Sonnet 18 and Sonnet 19, and therefore a through line from the procreation sonnets to this, the new stage of the sonnet, which is coherent and consistent. It absolutely connects. Now, the mode is different, because rather than speaking to the young man himself, I, the poet, William Shakespeare, address time, and I appear to plead, or as I have said before, even tell the old unimpeachable adversary that makes everything fade and disintegrate and decay and ultimately die, to spare my beautiful young love, only to then turn around and tell him, time, that he is powerless against my poetry. It is an astonishing turnaround from 3 sonnets ago, where I appeared to be suggesting to my love that he could find a mightier way and means more blessed than my barren rhyme to conquer time. We realized then, when we were looking at Sonnet 16 and its companion 15, that very probably Shakespeare wasn't being entirely sincere in this assessment. But if we were in any doubt at the time whether or not William Shakespeare really deep down felt that his poetry could save his lover from the ravages of time, by now there is none left. Sonnet 18 already put paid to it, and now with Sonnet 19 it is dead and buried. But Sonnet 19 stands out not for this alone, because in this it shares its audacity with Sonnet 18, and 18 arguably surpasses it. What makes Sonnet 19 extraordinary and unique in the series so far is that in it I, the poet, unequivocally talk about the young man as my love. For about 2 centuries, until quite recently, I would say the very tail end of the 20th century thereabouts, people have contorted themselves into trying to argue that somehow this isn't so, that for some reason or other we can or should not interpret these sonnets as William Shakespeare, a man talking about another younger man, as his love, and yet he couldn't be much clearer if he tried. O carve not with thy hours my love's fair brow, nor draw no lines there with thine antique pen. Him in thy course untainted do allow, for beauty's pattern to succeeding men. You cannot be in any doubt as to what this means. I talk about my love, and I call him him. Case really closed. And what Sonnet 19 also, and equally importantly does, is effectively render pointless any attempt at positioning Sonnet 18 elsewhere, or arguing that Sonnet 18 might just as well be addressed to some other person, for example, a young woman. There so very obviously and so very clearly is, as I have mentioned before, a progression from Sonnet 17 through Sonnet 18 to Sonnet 19, that the idea that Sonnet 18 might not belong in the sequence or might be meant for somebody else entirely becomes all but ludicrous. And so Sonnet 19 further supports the notion we received throughout the Procreation sonnets, the first 17 sonnets in the collection, that there is a trajectory which, though not strictly linear, marks a progression which here continues. The relationship between William Shakespeare and the young man is obviously, clearly evolving. Nothing points towards there being a new cast of principles. Everything points towards the same young man being the object of Shakespeare's growing infatuation. And so, while Sonnet 19 on its own makes a strong and emphatic point about the beauty of my young lover and the impotence of time against the power of my poetry, in the larger context of the constellation between me and my love, it may in fact be even more significant than the much more famous Sonnet 18, and also, perhaps, than the much more frivolous and explicit Sonnet 20 that follows, because it tells us that as far as William Shakespeare is concerned, the young man is his love. And of course, it tells the young man the same thing too. Now, this is not the first time the young man hears himself referred to as love. In Sonnet 13, I, the poet, call him love first, and then dear my love, but there is a possibility, we observed, that I may be speaking on someone else's behalf there. Sonnet 14, then, is the first to invoke the idea of the eyes as stars, which is not entirely original, but perhaps significant, as is such a well-worn trope in the context of love poetry. In Sonnets 15 and 16, I first propose, as I then do in Sonnets 17, 18 and 19, that my poetry can serve as the means to make you live forever, and I deploy the unnervingly visceral image of a graft, which I apply for love of you. In Sonnet 16 I also then backtrack a bit and proffer the somewhat disingenuous mightier way of procreation one more time, only to then, in Sonnet 17, put that back on a par with my writing. In Sonnet 18 I do not call you anything, but the whole tenor of the poem is that of one addressed to a lover or a loved one, and here now, in Sonnet 19, I spell it out. He, the young man, is my love, and no matter what that bloody tyrant, as I had called time in Sonnet 16, is up to, I will make sure that he stays forever young. You may not be convinced. You may think that perhaps this is all just a little too neat and too well-fitting to seem entirely plausible, that there may be a misunderstanding or something we're missing, that there may be some wishful thinking involved or some post-rationalizing, that perhaps something got lost in translation, as it were, or in typesetting, or that maybe we just shouldn't take love, in inverted commas, here too literally and to mean the kind of passion a man would direct to a romantic lover or love. And the next sonnet, Sonnet 20, is just about to blow any such doubts right out of the water by squarely addressing the issue, if you want to call it that, of gender head on. And so I hope you will join me again here on Sonnetcast as we recite, reveal and relive the sonnets of William Shakespeare.